Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Eindhoven Innovation Café. Also, welcome to everybody who's watching online. We are a weekly networking event where we give a platform to people speaking on the subject of design and technology. Tonight we have Ayushman Talwar here, talking about Hable. He'll give a presentation, and afterwards we can have drinks to talk about it further. This is made possible by the Dutch Design Foundation. They have their open applications at the moment, so if anyone of you would be interested, or if you know anyone who want to apply for the, what is it, the awards for?
It's for Dutch Design Week.
Dutch Design Week,
yeah.
Yes, open applications for the Dutch Design Week. So yeah, but I'll leave the floor to Ayushman.
Welcome. Thanks for being here. Dutch Design Foundation gave me a platform to speak about the story of Hable, which was a personal project of mine when I came to Eindhoven to study design. As you can see, I am not Dutch. I come from India, and I came to Netherlands in 2017 to study design. I did my engineering before that in India, electrical engineering, and back in India I used to live with my granddad who was visually impaired. So growing up, it didn't really strike me as any different situation as anybody else's situation, and I always took it like it's the part of life. And I always, so he was not born blind. That's an important part to the story, because most of the people with blindness are actually, they turn blind later on in life due to the diseases which are age-related. So when I grew up, or when I was born, I knew him as a person with visual impairment. And during engineering, there were projects that I did which were some hackathons, some were just engineering problems to solve, and I got introduced with a lot more people who were visually impaired. I can see I'm not going with the slides. So I got introduced with a lot of people with visual impairment. That's to showcase that, yeah, when I came to Netherlands, that was one of the books I was given by my Dutch friends, which speaks about the two cultures, the Indian culture and the Dutch culture, which again made me realize that my way of looking at life, just like my granddad, was that I treated these different people or the differences. For me, they seemed very normal. I didn't really, in my head, feel that the people in the Netherlands would be as different from the people in India. And this book really talks about some of these quirks or some of these things that you don't really think about. One of the things that I remember reading is about whenever a Dutch person picks up a phone, they would say, "Hello, this is Ayushman." And whenever my friends used to do that, I was a little bit amazed that why they have my number stored in their phone. Why would they pick up the phone and say who I'm speaking to? Because I know I'm calling them. And for somebody coming from outside, it just seems like a little rude that you didn't maybe save my number on the phone. And these small differences that you would never think about came in front of me when I was reading the book. In India, again, I started speaking to a lot of people who were visually impaired, and like the book, it made me more aware about the challenges or the things that the other person goes through when they're visually impaired, or how does their life change. Because if you're born sighted and suddenly at the age of 40, you discover that you're losing vision and you have to change the way of life, that's a very difficult period for a lot of people. So it's not just the operational things of how am I going to be do my occupation, or how am I going to cook food. It's also a lot of emotional and mental struggle to overcome when that happens. And that period could last 3 years, but also for some people 10 years, where they just want to do more. They want to feel independent, but they're just not being able to do that because of the limitations, the new limitations that they think that they have. For me, I don't really see it as limitations, but rather, some things that you have to look forward in a different way. And that changed my perspective by talking to these people, because the community of people who are blind or visually impaired, you would imagine that it would be they're very down, or they don't speak a lot, or they don't enjoy their life, but that was just the opposite of that. A quick forward to my journey in Netherlands. So because the inspiration of my granddad, from the inspiration of my granddad, I realized that he wanted to be independent and he couldn't use his smartphone. I started working on a project which helps people who use the smartphone. The smartphone is filled with all these new technologies, these sensors, which can make a person feel independent. It has a camera, so you can recognize a face using artificial intelligence. It has a GPS, so it can navigate you inside, but also outside, from one place to the other. So the smartphone had become a very important tool for people, but just the limitations of the flat screen, you just couldn't use it the same way that we do. And that became the center point for me, that if I could make the smartphone accessible or usable for people with visual impairment, I'm essentially giving back them the independence that they want. So we started working on Hable. It looks something like this. It's a tool which is a Bluetooth controller to the phone. It has 8 buttons with which you could use the whole phone. So the buttons you can use to open an app, type something on the app, close the app, and then as a feedback to what you're doing on the phone is everything audio. So I can connect it to my phone right now, I can switch on the audio, wear headphones, and I can listen to what I'm doing on the phone. So this really overcomes the flat screen by using tactile interfaces to have more control over their typing, but also use the phone. The 6 buttons in the center are like braille dots. So dot 1 would be alphabet A, pressing the 2 dots would be B, C, D, and so on. So you can essentially make any alphabet, character, word with it. But at the same time, you could use it to open an application and control the whole phone. So this became from a project from India to when I started studying design, through many competitions or these design challenges, it was just something I was working towards with other people who were visually impaired in the Netherlands. And then in 2020, we decided to actually formulate into a company, and that was due to the interest of a lot of people and their reactions, which were very positive in wanting to use such a thing. That's my co-founder, Freek, with which I started the company. And that's in one of the videos, he's explaining how to use a Hable. The importance of these videos is, again, to educate people about how to use this technology, because a lot of people do not know about assistive technologies. That's Roxana, one of the first users of Hable. And like I said, you would imagine that the community of people with visual impairment, you might have a different perspective. I had a different perspective before I started. Or no, they're always complaining, maybe, perhaps. But this really changed my perspective on what the community looks like. They're more energized every day you talk to them. They're ready to give you a lot of feedback on the product. They'll help you actually develop the product, and they'll give you so much feedback that you didn't even think about. There's an example. We had 46 people joining a WhatsApp group who just started using Hable, and the next day I woke up, there was 13,000 messages on the WhatsApp talking about the Hable, and helping each other out in using the Hable. So that's one of the wonderful things I found out, and I always say to the team that we have the largest possible product team that we could have, because yes, we have engineers, we have designers in the team, but we ourselves are not visually impaired. So we can never ever design products for people with visual impairment because we don't even know what they would need. So it's always been designing new things, giving it out to the community, and then asking for their feedback and reactions. One of the things that came about while designing the Hable, because today that's the center point of the conversation, that how does accessible or assistive technologies become more scalable so that everybody could use them. One of the thinking points was that you have designs that exist outside the assistive technology, and when you're designing a new assistive technology, do you borrow some decisions from that design, or is it the other way around, that when you're designing for assistive technologies, the parts that you learn about in designing that, you use that for the world outside. And there were a few touch points that I thought would be interesting to discuss and share with everyone. The first one was the hardware itself, or the interaction itself. Back in 2017, it actually started from the top left corner with the foam model as just an ideation, or that's where the first idea was born, that there should be a keyboard or a controller to use the phone, followed by some Lego prototypes, which we still thought, oh, we want to use the phone, so it has to be something at the back of the phone. That way, the phone itself could be one device where people can use it by just adding more tactile buttons to the phone. Then we were experimenting a lot more with, okay, so if it's part of the phone, maybe it can be part of the cover of the phone. And then it's maybe someday becomes like a new phone for people with visual impairment. And these are all ideations which should showcase where we were learning quite a lot by talking to people, by thinking about how can this assistive technology go to the market and become a success, that we don't have to make just 5 units of it, but maybe 5 million people around the globe can actually benefit from using it. So thinking about the business model and the scalability, and how can we as a company have the resources to take it forward. And at every point of these design decisions, it was not me who was taking the decisions. I was merely a designer who was iterating upon the feedback from the users. And then a very interesting thing happened after the iteration that you see on the clay model, where we gave it to people and they actually bought Hables and they paid a huge amount of money for it. And we went to them after 2 weeks just to learn, okay, how they're using it, just to realize that nobody wants to stick the Hable at the back of the phone, but everybody was using it as a separate device. So at some point it gave me a relief that, oh, I don't have to design anything as an attachment to the phone, because back then we just gave them a double tape and said, okay, there's a Velcro and a double tape, you can just stick it at the back of the phone, and that should be the good prototype, that should work. But nobody was using it like that. So at some point I was relieved that, oh, I don't have to design, or we don't have to design another thing for the attachment. But the interesting part was that, yeah, they were just using the phone separately and they were using it as a controller. And that made our decision making or our design choices so easy, because a lot of people themselves said that we want to use it in this fashion. And it helps because then you don't interfere with the screen, and you can use it as a separate controller, and the phone, the expensive phone, can be in your pocket. So when you're out and about and you're traveling, you don't have to hold the phone in your pocket, in your hands. You might drop it and you may never be able to find it in the train. The second decision we had to take, or the second point was, this is a picture at the Dutch Design Week where we had Hable showcased so that everybody could use it, try it out, and interact with it. And the most questions we got was, oh, have you ever tried this for people who are not visually impaired? Would they be interested in something like that? Maybe to navigate on the Instagram, maybe to like it, because people are lazy, so they can just not use the screen, but just sit and use it. So at that point, that was like the topmost question asked to the team and to me, that, oh, this seems very interesting, Braille, and looks like a coded secret information sharing system. Can it be used in other ways or other platforms? And that was another point where you could think that Braille is essentially for people who are visually impaired, or it was developed as a tactile interface on the paper with small 6 dots that people can read it instead of looking at it. That can this interaction be used outside the assistive technology for other people to benefit from it? This was another example where another touch point in the whole journey where COVID happened, and we actually registered the company in 2020 in June in the middle of the pandemic, and we still were developing and going forward, but now we couldn't interact with the user group directly. We had to find alternative ways of getting feedback and knowing the users. This is actually David and Daniel from UK, where we found out new ways of testing, where we used to make these prototypes, ship to people, and then have them video call to understand how they're using it. Not everybody had their dads with them, so a lot of people lived individually, and the interesting thing was about focusing the camera. So they were using their phones or they were using their laptops, and you would ask them to focus the camera where we could see their hands and them using it. And that's a very funny conversation. You say, oh, can you move the laptop or camera a little bit to the front and to the bottom, which makes no sense to somebody like how much further and how much back. But that was an interesting learning experience that, oh, when you're testing and user testing in a different environment where the user and you are not in the same place, how do you tell people how to hold the product? Winston, before the conversation, asked me a question about, oh, so you make this product, but if somebody wants to use it or get it, how do they start the journey? Where do they get from? So we looked at a journey of a user. Where does it start? So it probably starts at a place like a hospital, where they first time get to know that, oh, they're turning visually impaired. And the next steps are maybe going to a rehabilitation center like Visio or Bartimaeus, where they get to learn more about how to live with their impairment. But like my granddad, there are actually 70% of the people who never go to the specialized shops where they find assistive technology. There are few shops in Netherlands that exist which only sell technologies for people with blindness. But 70% of them don't even go to these organizations or these shops because they don't want to feel different than any other person. So they want to, because you were sighted and you lived your life like that, and now suddenly you have to go to these specialized stores just to buy your technology. That seems a little bit unreasonable. So the way we see it is assistive technologies should be made accessible to maybe your nearby Media Mart or to your KPN or to your Vodafone, and there should not be these specialized centers to get access to them. So one of the campaigns we are working on were in the studio in Amsterdam, where we used audio as a major focus. So there's 3D sound, and we have a campaign where people can listen in, and it's more publicized on social media. The family and friends listen in, and we educate them about assistive technology and how they can help the person that they're with to be able to become more independent. Another case where we used perhaps a design from outside assistive technology to help people who needed these assistive technologies. That's us quite some years ago in Utrecht at a place called Sea Taste. And it's a dinner in the dark experience where a group of us would just sit down and have food completely in pitch dark. By pitch dark, I mean pitch dark. There's not even a single thing that you could see, or even a small shadow. And the most interesting part about this is that the people who serve dinner are all visually impaired, because they are used to navigating themselves in an area which is where they cannot see, and they're able to guide others in that area as well. It was a very fun experience. You couldn't see the food. There was a lot of textures on the food. You just had to imagine what it could be, but you could only know when you tasted. It looked very strange and weird when I was just touching it, but then when I ate it, it was very, very different than what I thought. Another thing that we learned from while we were making the boxes of Hable, when we ship Hables to people and they get a parcel and they don't know where to start it from, it doesn't have any tactility, doesn't know where to open it. You don't want the Hable to drop out the first time they open the box. And it helped us realize that, maybe adding a little audio would help them welcome them a little more, because they cannot see on the box any visuals that are there. It makes us think the first 15 minutes when somebody gets a product, how do they start using it? And do they need help at that point or not? And that was a very interesting experience that we learned from. Again, just talking to people and explaining them helps me learn more and more. Last weekend we were in Spain in one of the conferences in Madrid, and even after developing the product, and now it actually is selling in 3 markets, Netherlands, UK and Germany, and other markets we just tested out and have these trials. Some things are still very eminent, which is when you get a product in your hand, how do you know that you have to use it with both your arms? There's nothing out there that you can relate to while using this device, and that is something that you just cannot. It's hard to explain when you're not there, and that happens a lot of times to us. Even when we are at exhibitions, we meet hundreds of people and they cannot see what we're giving in their hands, and when you give it to them, it's like I'm used to a controller or a remote, so it's like my remote with one hand. And then we have a challenge of explaining, it's like a phone, the buttons are on one side, you turn it around and then press the buttons towards you. So together with having something innovative which doesn't exist in the market, you also bring new challenges with new technologies that, how do you make it understandable? Because I could put an image with somebody using it, but they cannot see the image of that person using it. That's Danny. He's someone I met as a friend in one of the parties, festival. He's visually impaired. He used to be associated with Red Bull as a ice skating champion, and he's been sponsored by them. And he had his journey with visual impairment, and we work together at Hable, and he's somebody who's makes us realize and bridges the gap between the community we have and the product team and the team inside, because awareness is one of the biggest things that we work on. That since we are not visually impaired, it's very important for us to understand and be aware about all the challenges that come when either it's about a product or a service that somebody uses. And it's lovely to just chat with him, and it's like my untouchable book where I'm comparing the notes from what I know and the culture that I was taught, and then another culture that's out there. That was the story I had for today. This was a picture taken with the team at Stripe. The dress code was black, so it looks like we're a dance group, but we're not. And yeah, that was it. Thanks. I've never had a discussion, so I didn't expect people to verbalize their discussions right now, but yeah, I don't know if people have questions or you want to start a conversation. Yeah.
Sorry, make it audible for the live stream.
Yeah, I have a question. The input is quite clear. I was also wondering, like, what's the feedback modality towards the user itself? Is it like tactile as well, or is it an audio thing?
The feedback is audio, so I can give you a small demo.
Invest, My T-Mobile, Keep Notes, EVP, eToro, Helpmedellen, Spotify.
So the user would then use the Hable to navigate on the screen, and they would hear everything that they're doing as a feedback. And that would, yeah, and that was something interesting as well. You can choose between 30 voices, different countries, different accents. You can, and the speed that I set to right now is the learning speed for somebody, because the limitation to using is how fast you can get feedback. They actually set it to 90% speed, so it speaks out really quick. That we, as somebody who's learning, wouldn't even recognize what was said. And that's always funny that, yeah, that you have different settings and people have preferences and they share that. So.
Can I ask another quick question? Because you showed a video demonstrating how the product is used, but that sounds quite counterintuitive in reaching your target audience. So I was wondering, like, how do you reach out to a group of people that suddenly looks for these tools, so 70% doesn't go to these tools, and a lot of modern marketing is quite visual in nature. So you have like radio ads, or?
So that was one aspect that the 70% doesn't go. Another thing I learned was, as an engineer, I used to think about things as black and white. Oh, this is the one thing, this is the second thing, this is connected. In visual impairment, or I think other disabilities, a very similar trend, there is no black and white. It is not like some people can see nothing and others can see everything. It's a very gray area where you have percentages of how much you can see and in which eye you can see. And it's usually a degrading one. So you are sighted and then it degrades to a point that you become legally blind, that you cannot see. There are also, because of different conditions, you could maybe sometimes see the brightness in the room. You can, but you cannot see people, but you can see how bright the light is or not. So that's the limitation when it comes to scaling assistive technologies, that one solution, it's very hard to fit for all the different targets. So we had to take a decision. Is it just audio, or do we add video? Because it is a lot of work to add a video, but if they don't even need it, why do we do that? So we took two extremities, the friends and family of that person, because when they turn visual impairment, the emotional and the mental struggles are also huge. So you want somebody who understands and enters that journey with you. So they want to be able to see using the product, or how does it look, so they can guide the other person. So that's the reason we chose that we should add video as well. It was tons of work. We could have just did audio and it would have worked. But the second challenge was to look at the same clip, but by not looking at it, by just listening, and then seeing if it still makes sense. So they were, and in these videos, me and Freek were the actors, and so also doing the clips. So getting the script right and saying as it was in the script was quite hard. Again, scaling these videos for everything is a big thing. And that was the reason, yeah, we said we would like to keep the video with the audio because, yeah, some people can use it just the audio, but other people can use it just the video. Yeah.
Cool, thanks.
Did you patent this idea?
We have, yeah, patent on some things about the product. So yeah.
Yeah, so the reason for the question is, why do you want to marketize this? I mean, if it's become mature, what would be the next product? How would you maintain this? Is it maybe a strategy to bring it to a big company and let them do all the work?
Of course, we think about it every day. There are bigger platforms and channels so we can reach the mass media. So, like I said, yeah, it's very fragmented, the market. It's not like, oh, I'm visually impaired, let's join and make a group. I still don't have, where my granddad didn't have any friends who were visually impaired. So he would still, I would say, as a mainstream media, dependent on reaching or accessing products. The future ambitions you asked, so we still in the same dream I had about being able to use phones, learning how to use phones. It's still that focus, and around that focus we're looking at partners who actually have services for smartphones. So the big telecoms fit right into that strategy, helping us go to market in different countries. They sell smartphones with the subscription, and that's the opportunity for us to also introduce a new thing and basically educate people about these assistive technologies that exist, because yeah, not a lot of people know about that when they're there. We keep learning. We started launched the product September last year, so it's not been quite a while, but we are learning every day as to what other technologies, what other products we can make. But the services come very close to it. We want to keep on introducing that into the market.
And did you consider that tool that you have that it gives feedback, and now it's used as an input, but could it also give output?
Yeah. There are some ideas around it, since Braille is still relevant for a lot of people. I think you asked if it does, how does the output? A lot of people don't use audio as an output they use Braille displays where still the output is Braille. There are a lot of people who are deaf and blind. So it coexists, the two disabilities, and then they rely on vibrations as output. So the number of beeps, the distance between the beeps basically gives the output to the information, so giving time or text. So it can be used as an output as well. Yeah, we are a small team and we just need help to think about those projects as separate projects, because that would be probably a different target group or the same target group but with a different proposition that we can offer to them.
Thanks for the nice presentation. It's a really nice product.
Thanks.
Very inspiring. I have a rather detailed question maybe. So I'm a bit surprised. Maybe I'm not surprised, but you said that the users prefer the devices to be separate. There's an easy way to merge them by making the Hable box where you put the mobile phone inside. So is it then too heavy or because I still would imagine one device is easier than two devices.
Yeah. And that is still my dream. that is still my dream to merge them together. I think it's a combination of not being experienced with developing products, or not having enough funding to build a product which could do that, is still the limitation. So when you started out, it's still, okay, what is the minimal viable product that you can offer to the market? And yeah, one of the reasons I think why they said use it as a separate product was because then the Hable was still thick. You still have the length, the thickness of your phone, and if you attach another device at the back, it doesn't fit into the pocket anymore. But it's also your thumbs then interact with the screen, which you don't want. So you don't want unforced errors to happen.
Yeah, so maybe that was my question. It was the thickness. It was not like effect like the phone separating from the controller.
No, yeah.
It was not less the weight.
Yeah,
So
because still two devices. Yeah, why if I can do it with one, why should they have two separate ones? And then they have to.
in the future, you will make phones like
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Yeah.
So what are then the apps they are using? Because you don't need all the computation power of the phone. And you can simply buy I think it's a C2000 chip you put into the, what do you call that? The SMD chip from your service provider, and that's it.
Yeah.
And you have a small server running on it that you could make it yourself almost.
Yeah.
Eh?
Yeah.
So you don't need the full-fledged computer power of the.
It's again a new learning for me. There are a lot of people, since it's again age-related, so a lot of people get retired when they start using a new phone, and for them using the old T9 phone is just perfect because they don't need so much functionalities of the phone. They can just calling, basic functions is fine, but there is still a group that relies on the camera and the processing power for these artificial intelligent apps to run. That's heavy processing. Again, the screen is not ignored by everyone. So I was using my screen when I demonstrated. They still like the screen sometimes to be able to use some certain functions. They could definitely be what you said possible. So just have a different phone with just 8 buttons and yeah. I think it's definite to consider that option to see how far that goes. Yeah.
Thank you. Hi, Ayushman. Maybe a similar question in the sense that how much features of a smartphone can the Hable tap into right now?
Yeah. Everything. Basically, so you can use the whole phone, everything that you could do with the screen. A visually impaired person is able to do it with a Hable, and sometimes even quickly, because the interactions that you would use is holding and sliding to scroll a page, tapping to open something, pinching and zooming motions. With the Hable, you can perform some shortcuts. With text editing also, selecting a text, copying it, and it's a 2-step process where they can just go to the home screen with the press of a button. They can open notifications. They can open their favorite app by pressing F. So they can go to the Facebook by pressing F. And those are some quirky things that some Easter eggs we put in, so they can use it to even more than just using the finger gestures. Using a screen reader, the finger gestures become different. So you don't have any scrolling motion anymore. To go to the next item, you always do this swipe. To open something in which you have to click. For them, it's double tap.
Okay.
So they double tap to open something. Then it's 2-finger tap. It's 3-finger tap. 4-finger tap. There's something called as 5-finger tap.
Okay.
So you could imagine having on a screen and you have to press 5 fingers to tap something as a gesture is not something that people can do. Also, they don't know where they are on the phone to be able to do that.
The reason why I asked this question is this is assuming that someone is already visually impaired or was already familiar with technology in the sense, and at some point could not use technology anymore. And this is also the follow-up question is you must be having your market segment must be very fragmented as well, right? Somebody who got, let's say, visually impaired 10 years back and stopped using a smartphone or never have access to a smartphone before, may not be updated with new features of an iPhone, for example. Can Hable be used to teach someone the new technology or new features?
7% of our customer base is actually students or people under the age of 18, you would say, or they're still in school, so they're still studying. And it's very interesting to see their participation with using assistive technologies on the phone versus somebody who's above the age of 45.
Yeah. They will not have,
and the learning curve. So the people who were below 18, they're probably born with visual impairment. 45, they're probably not born with visual impairment. So they were also not born with technology, perhaps.
Exactly.
Right. So they had to learn smartphones later on, and there is a difference in the two. You could easily see that the challenge, and the reason we also chose people who are above the age of 45 as our main target group was their problems were severe or more pressing. So if we solved there, they would be relieved at they would be more relieved than the children. For them, it's just another tool or another toy to get to play with.
So you have a certain customer segment that you're targeting that?
Yes, yeah. We chose one which is not necessarily the largest, but whose problems are the biggest.
Okay.
So when we had these ideas about new smartphones, I think it's definitely interesting to see for which target group it would really work with and how can we do that.
Okay, thanks.
Last question? Give it to you first. Okay, go for it.
Thank you. I was just thinking, about the history of personal computers, and we didn't start out with a graphic user interface.
Yeah.
And I actually have some rather extremist friends. There's this religion called Linux, and they hate using the mouse. So I wonder whether it might be an interesting approach to write an operating system, to go one layer below, because you right now you try to put something at top of the graphic user interface of the smartphone. So wouldn't it be more interesting maybe to indeed save resources also and go one layer below and write an operating system that doesn't rely on all these fancy colorful icons? Go back to the roots, and that is maybe more interesting for visually impaired people. More simple.
Yeah. I do have to say, so there are some projects that exist around it, and perhaps that's also interesting. And the questions I ask in my head when I have that is, how again easy is it for somebody to start learning? I don't know where it was a question about learning part. Can you use Hable to teach people how to learn a phone with visual? Because learning to use a phone with visual impairment is different than you use as a sighted person. You have to build a mental model, and perhaps what you're saying with a different operating system is that you can help ease that mental model where things are more structured in a way that it's, or every time I go do this action, it does this function.
Yeah, don't try to imitate the structure of the graphic user interface.
Yeah. That's definitely something of interest. Yeah.
One last question from the crowd?
I'm not writing all these brilliant ideas, so
Well, you can all listen back to it. So.
I have to.
I was wondering when you were talking about the product going into the market, where it's not anymore in a controlled environment, where your community of users, you have a conversation with them, and the point that you brought up is how you're searching for or discovering how then people who are not directly talking to you, for example, are learning to use it and what their intuition says how to use it. Could you maybe I'm not going to ask a question, I'm just going to ask you to maybe elaborate a little bit on your findings in that. Should I ask a concise question?
Yeah, maybe.
better.
Yeah.
So, for example, when you first discover it as a user, have you gotten feedback about how people do they need the seller to explain it to them? Does it go through the family? So how exactly does it go when it's more out of your control?
We chose not just Netherlands but UK and Germany as well as our beachhead market. To say that okay, we'll learn from those markets as well, with the primary focus on what the customer journeys might look like. So we focused on the online channels and literally Facebook, Instagram, but sometimes we gave it to a distributor who's been selling assistive technologies and said, see what you could do with it. And after that, we just have interviews to ask, okay, so these 7 people bought from you, which ones did you contact by phone, which ones came to you? And it's always, you asked about findings. I think most of them were around the onboarding side. So onboarding when they first get the product and how do they use it. And it was interesting that the seller was making these CDs with our manual, but everything was audio. And he was shipping CDs free of cost with them. Then we didn't know people still use CDs. So the others was using USB stick, and they were recording everything and putting it on a USB stick. And then we just made that part of our design. Okay, we would actually use that because a lot of people can have that. There are many of these, interesting things that we found out from that lessons. So,
thank you.
I was wondering where you got the name from, Hable.
We were in Spain right now, and we got this question a lot of times. Or do you know that it means hable in Spanish? Hable español, which means speaking. And we said, no, we didn't. We actually did. But it means, it's a Spanish word, hable. And I didn't realize, my co-founder did, that it has a word play with able in it. And it's like, it just struck me 2 weeks after that. Oh, that's pretty good. So we stuck with it. And let's say we were not as creative with coming up with names of the product. So the company's name is Hable One, and we said, okay, the first product, what should we call it? You have a OnePlus One, you have a Samsung One or something. Hable One, let's do that. So that's why it's called Hable One.
Well, thank you for the presentation and for answering all of our questions. I suggest we further delve into the topic for drinks at the bar. You will provide the snacks, and you can order the drinks at the bar. If you've taken any glasses with you, please take them back into the restaurant. Thank you, Dutch Design Foundation, for making this possible. Again, the applications for the Dutch Design Week are open, so if you know anybody who would be interested in exhibiting or participating in any way, check out the website or get in touch with our guests. You're also invited to stay for the meetup table this evening, where we have dinner for €19.50 or €17.50 if you're a vegetarian. Keep in mind that the Innovation Café isn't going ahead next week. We will have the Kazerne Design Awards, which is available for us on the live stream. And the week after that, we will have Jip Bierkens here. So I'll see you then. Thank you.
Hey, you're still here. So you like the video. If you want, subscribe and click the bell.